Here we go, Chamocha. No, we're not gonna do a full recap. We're at this new section of the Maamar now. What we're trying to figure out here is, what does it mean that we exist? If God is everything, what is existence? What does it look like? What does it mean? If we're here in this physical world, are we just here? What does the progression look like for us to get here? Are we still attached up there? How does this all work? If God is something that's spiritual or intangible, how do you get a tangible world out of it? Very deep philosophical questions, obviously. What is existence really? Spoiler alert, this Maamar that said the 1800s. If the Rebbe Maharash would have been like, nobody exists, I think we'd be here right now. A little bit of spoiler in case you're wondering, do I even matter? The answer is yes. In case anybody was losing sleep over this. So that's why if you follow, that we're trying to figure out what existence is, you can follow the progress of the Maamar that is looking at all these different things. It starts with Chamocha B'Elam Hashem, who is like among all the supernal beings, which we're going to return to now these original commentaries. Yonasan ben Uzziel, who said, who is like you among the supernal beings? There's no one like you among the supernal beings. There's only God. You have Okos, who says there's actually nothing in existence except for him. Not just nobody measures up to God, but there's nothing in existence except for God, that he is the only existent. And that led us into all the last couple of classes about what do you mean that nothing exists if we actually have a world? And they say, okay, well, this is what it looks like. Even the physical world doesn't just come into being. There's a progression that occurs. Starting all the way up at the top, and then moving down. The whole descent that occurs, starting all the way from God, moving all the way down. There has to be layerings, a process for the world to come into being. Eventually, once all the spiritual realms have finished with their cause, effect, there's a leap of something from nothing. So we did all the different examples of it with the foliage and with the rooster, snow and lion, all of it to show what it looks like. Not just that does the world exist and what's the difference between the spiritual realms and the physical realms, but to show that our physical world is part of the progression that began all the way up in the higher spiritual realms. Again, we're not just here. There's a whole process that occurs and we are ultimately connected in that process. We're still attached. We didn't just pop into being and are free-floating. We're part of a process that began in the highest of spiritual realms and ended here in this physical world. That's basically all the different everything. That's what we came to. Last class when we started looking, is the world an illusion? If it's an illusion, do Torah mitzvahs even matter? We return to the question of if there's only God in existence, then is the world an illusion or not? What are we doing here? And that's when we started with the whole example of the cucumbers. If someone gathers with magic or someone gathers with like an illusion of magic. So if you can punish someone for doing magic, then the world must be real. If the world is not real, then reward, punishment, it's irrelevant. The conclusion a little bit slipped in here with the, there's actually one of the footnotes, where we know the world exists because Torah mitzvahs tell us that it exists. And Torah mitzvahs are true entities. So through doing Torah mitzvahs, we make the world a true entity. So, okay, if we're talking about true existence, are angels, who's among you, the supernal beings, are angels' true existence? So we went through a whole thing of the only way you can tell the difference between angels is according to their intellect. Because they don't have a physical form that you could tell the difference between them. By definition, that's part of what an angel is, that it has no physical matter or substance. Is an angel a real entity? The whole thing where God showed them his little finger and then gone, all of them gone. So no, they're not a true entity. That was the conclusion we came to. That God's whole little finger things, that God showed them more of the divine light than it took to bring them into existence, seeing that they were nullified in their existence. Man, through the work that we do down here, we are able to take in greater revelations and still stay in existence. Which, by the way, you can see with the whole thing with the angels. That's when we talk about that God had to have the contractions for the world to come into being. And, you know, like the laser point, focus of light, etc., you could see why. Because if we would be shown it at the level that the angels were, then it would just be nullified in existence. So the whole structure of the world, the fact that we can't see God, we're busy looking at the turtle shell, going, where is he? Where is he? Because otherwise we wouldn't exist. Now, the last time we figured out that, okay, we do exist. Now, we're going to bring in a new element of whether or not we really exist. It brings in this idea where it talks about what's called the paraduma. The paraduma is the red heifer. Yes, so it has to be perfectly red, can never have a yoke on it. The whole mitzvah of the paraduma, the red heifer, it's what we call a chok. Remember we learned this Hanukkah time that there's 3 levels of mitzvah. Mishpatim, which we kind of call civil laws, things that we would probably come up with as a society because they make a lot of sense. The edus, which are testimonials. All the mitzvahs of Pesach, let's say, Sukkot, and all these things that they're celebrating an event. So maybe we would have come up with them on our own, but we get why we have it. And then you have what we call chukim, a chok, translated as a statute, it makes no sense. Even something like kosher is a chok. It doesn't make sense. Why this animal, not that animal? Only domesticated animal. Okay, well you could domesticate a horse. Pigs are domesticated. Why can't we eat pigs? So the whole thing of kosher is a chok. Shatnez, the mixture of wool and linen. It makes no sense. So the paraduma, this red heifer, is considered also a chok. And the reason for it is because the whole process, what they use it for, officially is going to be 10, and then we've had 9 so far. So they say the 10th one is going to be in Messianic times. The general idea, though, of the red heifer is that they would take this pure red cow, burn it down to ash, then there's a whole mixture that you would make out of it, and then they would use this different things that occur, and it would be a purifying water that they would sprinkle on them. Part of the whole process of being purified. So the reason why it's considered chok that doesn't make sense is because the people who are involved in the process of making the red heifer waters, purifying waters, become impure through the process of making the purifying agent. Anyways, this is what it is. So why are we talking about the red heifer? Because there's specifications for the water that you use to mix it with. Here, this is from the Torah that says, They shall take for that unclean person from the ashes of the burnt purification offering, and it shall be placed in a vessel filled with spring water. So here it translates as spring water. In Hebrew it says Mayim Chayim. We recognize these words. Mayim is water, Chayim is life. So living waters. What does it mean, living waters? Like, why can't I just go to like a pond and take the water? What's a living water? Rivers that dry up once in 7 years are invalid for the paraduma, for the red heifer. The ashes have to be mixed with living waters. So what it says is that if a river dries up within 7 years, it's not considered a living water anymore. It explains this in, I think it's part of the Mishnah. Amayim mukim sulim, Eloheinu mukim, amluchim v'aproshrim. Spoiled waters unfit. What are spoiled waters that you can't use for the paradum, for the red heifer? Hamluchim v'aproshrim, salty or lukewarm waters. Amayim machazvim psulin, waters that disappoint are unfit. Eloheim amayim machazvim echad b'shavua. Basically, it's commenting on the living waters. What waters can we have? Say spoiled waters. What are spoiled waters? Salty, lukewarm. So those are waters that disappoint, they're unfit. What are waters that disappoint? Those that disappoint even once in a 7-year cycle, as in they dry up. You have to find a better translation. Those that disappoint only times of war and years of drought are fit. Maybe it says they're unfit. Differentiating that if there's a drought or something like that a lot of water sources are going to dry up. That's not the same thing as something that's part of a cycle that 7 years it dries up, within 7 years. Why 7 years? Because it's considered a complete cycle of time. We have 7 days a week. That's a complete cycle of time. So according to the natural world, this is considered alive. 7 days. When we talk about Shemitah, the sabbatical years, happens every 7 years. We're showing how the 7 years is considered a cycle. This is the commandment from the Torah. Hashem spoke to Moshe on Har Sinai saying, Speak to your children of Israel, you shall say to them, when you come to the land that I am giving you, the land shall rest a Sabbath to the Lord. You may sow your field for 6 years, and for 6 years you may prune your vineyard and gather in its produce. In the 7th year, the land shall have a complete rest, a Sabbath to the Lord. You shall not sow your field, nor shall you prune your vineyard. Do you guys remember when we did all the 7ths are considered dear? Remember all the 7-year cycle and went through all the 7s that are considered special? We had the 7 days of the week. The 7th one is considered more special. The 7 years is more special. So we see here, there's something about the 7. And here it's showing that the 7, it creates a complete cycle. So that's why it chose, why is it a living water? Because 7 years is the cycle. Now, check this out. This is from the Gemara. Amar Rav Katina, Sheis Alfei Shnei Hava Alma. Rav Katina says 6,000 years is the duration of the world and is in ruins for 1,000 years. The duration of the period during which the world is in ruin is derived from verse, and state, and the Lord alone shall be exalted on that day, and the day of God lasts 1,000 years. Abaya says it is in ruins for 2,000 years, as it is stated, after 2 days he will revive us, and 30 he will revive us, and we shall live in his presence. There's a general idea that the world is going to exist. The physical world that we live in now is going to exist for 6,000 years, / 7,000 years. Explaining it, existence and decay are both part of the divine will. The fact that the world should exist, that's the divine will. The fact that the world will decay or be destroyed is part of the divine will. The last millennium will be a time when the coarse physical world is destroyed and the world will reach its ultimate elevation in Mashiach's times. So it's taking the explanation we have for this. We're talking about the world being destroyed. It means that the coarse physical world that we know is going to be destroyed. The world will reach its maximum. It's the maximum elevation in Messianic times after that 6,000 year period. And that last 1,000 years, that's Messianic times. That's how it's explained. That's going to be Messianic times. Nothing can be elevated anymore. Right in the times of Mashiach, we've reached elevation. We don't elevate anymore at that point. We just sit and learn in the knowledge of God. So that's part of what he's saying, that it's going to be destroyed, is because the world that we know now is going to be destroyed. Not that the world itself, but the world that we know now is the way that it's interpreting it. We are in the year 5784. One way or another, the Mashiach is going to come by the year 6000. It's the general thought of it. The idea, though, is that we want to bring Mashiach before then. First of all, we want to be meritorious of it, that Mashiach should come early. And not just that, we don't want to be in exile anymore. Also to merit it, and also because, like, enough of the exile already. According to Gemara, that after 6,000 years, Mashiach will be forced to come at that point. Because the world only lasts for 6,000 years. There's a lot of commentary about what the world's going to be like when Mashiach comes, whether or not we're still going to have a physical world or not. It seems the general consensus is that when Mashiach comes, we're going to start off with a physical world, and eventually it's going to morph into a much more spiritual world. Also, the whole idea of reincarnation, the body is coming back. The Rambam says it's a fundamental, we say it every day in davening, it's a fundamental belief in Judaism that there is going to be, the bodies will come back. Where are the bodies coming back to if it's not a physical world? And not just that, the body has to be rewarded for Torah mitzvos. It must come back. The body itself, even the physical body the godly soul fights with, remember the godly soul is fighting the animal soul in the body. Because the body's like, let's go clubbing, and the godly soul is like, let's go to shul. Conflict of interest. You can't have two kings with the same crown. But the body does do mitzvos. Against its will or not, the body does mitzvos. So how can the body not be rewarded for having done a mitzvah? The fact that the body's going to come back in Messianic times, that's its reward for having done the mitzvah. The body itself is elevated. And specifically, this physical world we're going to come back to. It's also the physical world that we're going to know in Messianic times is going to be different. We're going to be here, but it talks about, remember, the wolf is going to lie with the lamb. What does that mean? Because in Messianic times, there's no more predator and prey. There's no more sickness anymore, because when the sun is shining totally, there's no shadows. Yes, the physical world like we know it, as far as the physicality of it, but the physical world itself is going to be a more refined physical world. That's why they're pinpointing that it's the coarseness of the physical world is going to be destroyed. More versifications. This is from the prophet Yeshaya. It talks about, for as the new heavens and the new earth that I am making stand before me, says the Lord, so shall you see it and your name stand. Like, what is it talking about new heavens and a new earth? So here it's also saying this idea that God's going to destroy the world, quote unquote, and make a new world out of it. The commentary that we're going with is that the new world is a messianic world. But now here's the question. We just said that if a river dries up once in 7 years, that's not living water. 7 days is a cycle of a week. 7 years is a cycle of Shemitah. So we're talking about 7 millennia being a cycle of a world. But apparently, according to the Gemara, the world is going to be destroyed once within that 7,000 year period. So is it a real world or not? Here we have from Rambam. Hu shadavi omer, v'Hashem elokim emes, hu levadar emes, v'en lachar emes. This is implied by the prophet's statement, and God your Lord is true. Truth is eternal, it's unchanging. He alone is true, and no other entity possesses truth that compares to his truth. Here, Rambam is saying truth in being eternal and being something that's real, equating it, Rambam saying that nobody is real like God is real. Nobody has truth, eternality, livingness, existence like God has. So that's what is meant by the Torah statement. There's nothing else aside from him. Aside from him, there's no true existence like God's existence. Here it's specifying that God exists in a very specific kind of way because he's the only true existence. So nobody has a true existence like God has. There's no beginning or end to God. God just is. So nobody else or nothing else just is. Everything has a beginning and an end to it, even the world itself. So this goes with Yonatan ben Uziel, Tarim Yonatan, this goes with his explanation. When we looked originally at the 2 commentaries that gave us explanation about what does it mean, Chamocha be'elam Hashem, who is like you among the supernal beings, there is none else besides him. There's nothing else besides him, as in nothing else exists like God exists. Whatever kind of existence everybody else has, or everything else has, it's not God's existence. God is the only one with a real existence. Everybody else has a sort of a temporal existence. There is none like you among the supernal beings, as even their creations subject to the will of the Creator. Even talking about the angels, these spiritual entities, that angels up in the higher realms and whatever they can see and do, etc. But God shows them a little finger and they're gone. Even the angels that seem to be these higher forms of creation, they're not like God's existence because they are still a created being. Who's like among the supernal beings, it says there's God and then there's everything that was created. Those 2 existences are not the same existence. God is a true existence and everything else is a created existence. Onkelos, who's the second commentary that we saw, he says, there's nothing else but God. Not just nobody else has an existence like God, but there's actual nothing else like God. There is nothing but him. Even a subjugated existence, as careful study of physical matter proves, it's not truly physical. Yonatan ben Uziel says nothing exists like God exists. There's God and there's all the created beings. Onkelos says it's not that there's nobody who exists like God. There is actually nothing but God. Everything is just part of the godness. Here they're talking about angels. The angels saw too much and they were nullified out of existence. We already said that Jewish people doing God's will, we could experience greater revelations and we don't get nullified out of existence. Onkelos says if you look at physical matter, is it really a real existence or not? It gives an example of wood that burns. Everything that's created is made out of the 4 elements: fire, air, earth, and water. It just depends on what the measurements are that differentiates us. It says you look at it, the wood is burning, the wood is all 4 elements. But its substance, the substance of the wood, is not any one of those elements. How do we know that? Because once it gets all burned up, it becomes ash. So the fire element somehow removes the other elements from it. But now what do you have left? Now you got ash. Ash is also somehow made up of these 4 elements. The wood, it's not fire or air or earth or water. It's whatever actually binds those 4 together. Whatever power is the binding element, that's the wood's true existence. And that binding element is not a physical entity. The binding element is the power of creation. The binding element is something that's spiritual and supernatural. So even wood's true existence is not fire or air or earth or water, but actually that element, that power that binds them all together, That is the true existence, even of a physical matter. Think about it, like, what's a body without a soul in it? It's not alive. It's there, but it ends up going back to the earth that it came from. Because the soul is what keeps it functioning the way that we see it. If not, it goes back, it reverts. Everything that doesn't have the God spark in it reverts back. It falls apart, but it disintegrates as long as it's biodegradable. So Uncle is saying there is nothing that exists besides for him, as in something, it's not anything without the God spark, going back to God. So without God, the power binding it all together, it's not even it either. Comes next is from Tanya, where it explains about nothing exists without God bringing it into existence. That's what the section ends off with.